grants, you are familiar with the like 24 pages of certified assurances that follow your grants, that you say, yes, we do this, we do this, we do this. And when I wrote the grants and supervised my agency, I didn't even think about sharing those certified assurances with all of our staff. But it's what we say we'll do and we won't do. And so we thought, you know, we should really educate all advocates on the certified assurances. They're not always the most fun thing to learn about, but they are important things. These are things that come from our federal funders. And so I'm going to turn the time over to Mariah and Kelly to highlight those.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tally from the OVC. Need no introduction, just get going here. So Mariah and I are here to talk about the that. And these activities are actually more specific under VAWA and SAS grant. Anybody here in the room have a VAWA and or SAS grant? Anybody have one? Okay, we got one. So VAWA is one of our smaller programs as far as funding wise, smaller, but it packs a punch. Oh, that's not appropriate. Okay, but that just makes that joke so nervous. Anyway, so VAWA is for Violence Against Women Act. It's to provide services, training, law enforcement and prosecution courts to crimes against women such as domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, and sexual assault. So there are some people that have these grants. SAS is also a part of that, and it's just sexual assault programs. So these certified assurances that we're going to be highlighting today are actually only specific to those programs. So we want to make that clear first of all. We know many people have BOCA grants, and there are some people who don't have any grants, and that's really great that we're still here and engaging in this training, because I think that's really important. But these are actually really things that every victim advocate, anybody that's working with victims, to be honest, should be practicing. So we want to just hit home with that, in that even though this isn't specifically a part of your grant, it really just needs to be something you're doing. We don't need to be like making you do it. And also, you know, if you have some concerns with any of these, like, oh, I think we could use some help there. I mean, we're not looking at this, oh, our auditors here, actually, our auditors here. We got you, you know, as it is more like, hey, you know, let's provide some training, some technical assistance. How can we help support you to come into the place? Okay. Oh, Maddie's doing it. Okay. And so this is the main underlying principle of these activities that we're going over. Especially sometimes people are like, why do you have to do that stupid thing? Like confidentiality is always a big one. You know, like, why are you guys being so difficult? You know, and having worked as a community-based advocate in a shelter for 4 years, I would get that a lot. Like, gosh, you guys are just being difficult. Until one night we did have an offender call up and say, literally acting like a police officer trying to get some information on our clients. So yes, we do need to be difficult sometimes to protect victim safety. And certain practices can actually compromise that. Okay, let's move on. Another thing to remember is that we only have 15 minutes for this, and each of these are like probably like a whole training, and we're actually thinking about doing that. So this is going to be a water skiing version. I know you guys are all really excited to hear this information, but we'll be writing more resources and probably more training later. So okay, so I forgot which one else.
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
I am Mariah Peace. I'm the VAWA and SAS program manager. I don't know if I was introduced at the beginning. So if you look up the prohibited activities, there's 7 main ones that apply against all grants that come out of OVW. So if anyone has a grant directly with OVW, you would also have these same prohibited activities. And then it goes in even further. And then if you, for specific grants, if you have like a tribal coalition grant or sexual assault services grants, like specific, it has additional activities that are prohibited. So we are just going to cover the main 7 And then we will briefly mention some other that we feel are appropriate to practice in your agency organizations. So this first one is, I'm gonna read it, procedures and policies. So I think those are the key words, like procedure and policy. So it's great that if you're doing these activities, but do you have it as part of your policy and or procedure? So that's gonna be the key word that we talk about today. Exclude victims from receiving safe shelter, advocacy services, counseling, and other assistance based on their actual perceived sex, age, immigration status, race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, mental health condition, physical health condition, criminal record, work in the sex industry, income or lack of income, or the age and or sex of the children. So that covers quite a bit, right? So we have, you know, one that just came up recently, was where, a survivor was talking to an officer about her sexual assault. Her way of communication, she was deaf, so it was through a device. That device was broken from the perpetrator. And so the officer used the offender to get the story. She was arrested. So those are things I would think that probably wouldn't still be happening and that would be in those policies and procedures, but that is a recent thing that we just heard. So I would encourage you to, we are all doing great things and I think we've made huge strides. We've also heard great things such as, you know, making sure that your buildings are wheelchair accessible or making arrangements otherwise, things like that. So using correct pronouns for the LGBTQ community. So we hear a lot of really great things too. So we just want to make sure that you're going over policies and procedures to make sure that these prohibited activities.
Okay, this one's really straightforward, and not, that's why we're just not gonna go into it too much. Policy procedures that compromise the confidentiality of information and or privacy of victims. We talked about confidentiality. If you don't know, then we have some information on our website, and definitely be well educated in that. If you have some questions, reach out to myself, reach out to Mariah, reach out to your grant analyst. Vicki is here. She's our victim advocate liaison. We have lots of information on that. There are different standards, whether you are a community-based advocate or a system-based advocate. And so we can talk more about that. But that's mostly what we're going to talk about, confidentiality, and just really emphasizing more what Mariah said, policies or procedures. I personally, this isn't the certified assurances of Tally, so I can't really add this in here, but if I could, I'd probably put policies, procedures, and practices. But, you know, the biggest thing that we're trying to look at here is if you have policies or procedures that say, I hope no one has this, but anyone that comes into the shelter, you need to tell them who's here. Be a bad policy, right? You know, then really need to get that out of your policies and procedures. Now, if you have some employee or volunteer that's gone broke and has kind of done their own thing, that's obviously still a problem. That's training. But what we have noticed more often is when these activities, these prohibited activities are happening, is because there's no policy and procedure. So my recommendation would be to have policies and procedures to implement confidentiality, because usually if you don't have something, people are more likely to do whatever they think is best in the circumstance, which usually isn't always the best idea. So make sure that everybody's trained and knows what the policies are.
One last thing on that. So everyone should have a victim release information form, right? So help me, what are the 4 things that need to be on that form?
Oh, pop quiz.
So time sensitive, right? So it has to have a deadline. It has to be reasonable. It cannot be a year from now. Okay. Who the information is being released to. Yep. The victim needs to know the reason and who it's going to. What information is going to be released. Yep. Sorry, someone said it.
Signature.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, if anyone wants a review of their form to make sure all of those elements are met, you can send it to me. If you want us to send you a sample of a time-sensitive release, then we can send you a sample that you can adopt or kind of shift for your needs. So we have that in our office. Please review your forms and make sure that it has those elements in there. Okay, next one, Maddie. All right, this number 3 is basically putting strings attached to the service. So you must file a protective order in order to receive our services. Or participate in couples counseling or mediation, which is definitely not a good activity. But basically, so this reporting to law enforcement to receive services. So basically, these services need to be with no strings attached. They do not have to cooperate in the law enforcement or in court to receive services. Or what's some other examples? And think about your own policies and procedures. Yeah, you don't have to participate in group if you're in shelter. What are some other, thinking about your own policies and procedures, what do you have in there related to this that could help others?
They're not gonna say what they have in there. That's not good.
No, I mean, that is good.
Oh, that is
What what things do you have in there that, or what things do you do that you can help the rest of the group as they're trying to update theirs? Too early, right? Okay, well, be thinking of that. And then the 4th one, conducting safety planning with victims. So I think that one's a pretty straightforward safety planning. Okay.
Yep, okay, so language access, who here receives funding, both of those asked, I know we just talked about both of, okay, yeah. We're all tired, that's okay. I'd probably still be in bed if I wasn't standing here. So most of you guys, not all, because this is part of OCA as well, you should have received an email from our lovely Hildegard Koenig. I think she's online, and what's that, Hildy? And she is our outreach and diversity coordinator here at UOBC. And language access plans are absolutely essential that you will need to have for your organization. And that includes unique needs such as deaf or individuals, and also disability too. And that's a whole other area. Like I said, this is a whole other training too. But just keep in mind that a language access plan might have. We've seen a lot of plans that are more components of a plan, which are good, but they need to be more comprehensive than we received a few emails saying, hey, we hired a Spanish speaking advocate, so we're good now, right? And I kind of want to acknowledge that for like, oh, yeah, well, that's good, you know, but we do need to have a little bit more than that. And so Tilby is really great to provide you some templates of plans of what we need to do. One other thing that I just want to point out in there is project design, product services. So, you know, we're not just talking about interpreters, but what are your products look like? And then budgets, you know, the concern we hear more often is we don't have funding to get interpreters or to do this. We give you guys a lot of funding. And so if we get people saying that, we're like, here's some money, don't say that to us. So please don't use that one with us, because for the most part, if that is a serious concern, and we know funding is going down, but that one probably won't work, because we could talk to you guys about making sure you have funding for that. And it needs to be planned in your budget, you know, ahead of time, not just, oh no, someone shows up at the door that speaks another language. You know, it needs to be planned. So,
and I would say throughout your, not just in your budget, but throughout your application, like it says, your project design. If you have interpretation and other things on your budget, they should also be in your program plan and through your objectives. So you should be able to see that throughout, and even in your the questions. So you should be able to see this all the way through your application. They should all 3 major components of your application should really tie together. Maddie. we have 2 minutes, so we're going to go quickly. Technology without addressing implications of victim confidentiality. This goes back to the confidentiality. If you read through the confidentiality statute, it talks about technology, how you're keeping your information safe. Is it password? Is it encrypted? Those kind of things. So you want to make sure that the technology that you're using is confidential, safety, and need for informed consent. So I'm going to breeze through that really quickly. That's all covered under the confidentiality statute. 7, partnering with, I think this is kind of like a catch-all, partnering with individuals or organizations that support or promote practices that are following the same activities that you are and not following the same activities that you're not. So the prohibited ones, that's the better. So that one was kind of a catch-all. I'm going to quickly go back to Tally so she can touch through a couple more.
And one other thing I just remembered, that if you receive any dollar amount of our SAS funding, this applies to your whole organization. So just because they're like, oh, well, these activities only apply to the advocates, not to everybody that works here. So actually, it applies to everybody. And like I said, while it's not required under VOCA, if we do, if you don't receive VAWA, but you're providing victim services, we might have some just conversations about how to do better. I'm not gonna go through all these because we're out of time, and some of them are a lot smaller, but I believe the resources are under this QR code, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So we have that in the folder. If you have a minute, go ahead and just kind of look through them. Like I said, it's overall just best practices. Would you mind going on to the next slide, Maddie? Yeah, all of these ones. And yeah, there's our contact info. Any questions?
Really quick.
Quick questions. Okay, put the questions out in the chat too, if you have any, or come and stop us if you're here in person, we'd be happy to talk about it. Like I said, we want to give the next presenter enough time, so if you have any questions, we're happy to discuss those. Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry.